Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and let me just remind you that I've got a fresh new podcast 5 nights a week now, or 5 days a week. Yes, that includes this broadcast because this broadcast is also a podcast, so that's technically the 5th of the podcast, but regardless, Monday through Friday, you have a fresh new podcast to listen to from Geek Therapy Radio. So make sure you subscribe to that for all the listeners on the radio right now. Subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio in your favorite podcast app. Of course, we like the iHeartRadio app, but you also got it in Spreaker and Pocket Cast. I love Pocket Casts on my Android. Of course, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, just wherever you can put a podcast into the search query, type in Geek Therapy Radio, and I virtually promise you it'll come up. I don't think it's on Spotify, however. I haven't checked recently if Geek Therapy Radio comes up on Spotify, but darn near everything else, just type in Geek Therapy Radio. It'll come up 5 days a week, fresh new content. All right, in this first segment, I wanted to harp on Nintendo for just a little bit. I think it's kind of it's a little bit hypocritical of me personally, if I can be hypocritical of myself, that sometimes I feel, even though I try not to be, harsh on Apple for Apple's business practices. I try to be objective, and for the most part, I do believe that I am. I've got my Apple iPad. I love the iPad. I do not have an iPhone. I do not currently have a MacBook. I want one, but I've been critical of Apple for Throttlegate, been critical of Apple for Bengate, and there's so many things to rip on Apple for sure. But Nintendo's kind of the same way, really. If we're really honest with ourselves, there's plenty to rip on Nintendo for. So last night I was playing Mario Kart 8 with my friend James online. We had a little man date where we played Switch Online together, and we tested out the voice, what do you call it? Just Nintendo's voice chat while you're gaming. And it's how it's so absurd in 2019, just absolutely bonkers insane, that Nintendo doesn't have native voice chat on the Switch yet. This is a feature that goes all the way back to the Xbox and probably before that, even online gaming with PC gaming. Voice chat, online voice chat has been around for well over 10 years. It is not a new technology, but still, Nintendo does not have it natively on the Switch, which is only the, tip of the iceberg to Nintendo Switch issues, but really, James and I were chatting. You have to download the Nintendo Switch app on your Android or your iPhone. So I downloaded the Nintendo Switch app and logged into my Nintendo account through the app. And it is relatively easy when you have the app, and I have the little Bluetooth thing in my ear, so we were able to chat relatively easily once we had everything all set up. But just the fact that you have to use a separate, if you want a voice chat, you have to use a separate app on your phone is quite frankly ridiculous. But that's not even the most ridiculous thing about Nintendo right now. And remember, I say this with love in my heart for Nintendo. I have grown up with Nintendo since the mid-'80s. I remember getting the first Nintendo Entertainment System. I vividly remember piling in the Oldsmobile station wagon, diesel Oldsmobile station wagon, sitting in that rear seat facing out the back window, looking at the drivers, while we drove to Target to buy Super Mario Bros. 2. I vividly remember that because I remember being bummed out that we'd buy the game, and then I felt like I would never get to play it. When I was a child, I just felt like I would never get to play Super Mario Bros. 2 because my two older brothers would just hog it. Didn't turn out to be the case. I got plenty of time playing Super Mario Bros. 2, so I'm just saying that my history with Nintendo goes way back to my formative years. So I love Nintendo, but they are not without fault. The biggest issue with Nintendo right now, with the Nintendo Switch specifically, is the Nintendo Switch Lite. While it is, by all accounts, an amazing device on its own, it is simply mind-boggling the way Nintendo handles cloud saves when every single one of their competitors handles it seamlessly. For instance, when I launch Steam on any of one of my PCs, any of them, my cloud save is just there instantly. I pick up where I left off in any game instantly. If you have a Nintendo Switch and a Nintendo Switch Lite, cloud saving is a nightmare, and you can actually, if you're not careful, if you don't upload and download your cloud saves every single time you open and close a game between the Nintendo Switch Lite and the regular Nintendo Switch, you risk losing it. Meaning that there's potential there to save over a new cloud save with an old cloud save and basically not get any of that progress that you've made back ever. You can't restore it. It's just a nightmare how careful you have to be and how restricted cloud saving is, and even playing games period is, between two Nintendo Switches on the same exact Nintendo account. If you're on the same Nintendo account, there shouldn't be any restriction on how your game is being played or how you play your copy or copies of Mario Kart 8, for instance. You should just be able to put down one Switch, pick up the other Switch on your same Nintendo account, and pick up right where you left off, or just be able to play. It shuts down one game and allows you to continue it on the other. And it kind of does that, but that's the point. It kind of does that. You can't play a downloaded game on a Nintendo Switch Lite if you have any game open on the regular Nintendo Switch. If your regular Nintendo Switch is hooked up to the internet, you can't play downloaded games on the Nintendo Switch Lite until you take their first Switch off the internet. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And you'd think, an interesting point, before we get out of the segment here, interesting point that James brought up the other night. Die-hard, hardcore Nintendo fans are the ones buying the Nintendo Switch Lite to go along with their normal Switch. You would think that Nintendo would have this figured out by now and at launch of the Nintendo Switch Lite, but they didn't. It's all so crazy, but one can only hope this will be remedied in an upcoming patch. We can only hope and pray Nintendo hears us. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I just wanted to touch on something. Maybe I'll make the whole segment out of it. Maybe it just be for a few minutes here. But I do want to touch on something since it's been asked of me at least twice in the last week. Over on KTRH, my normal 9 to 5, which is really 12 to 8, is over on KTRH running the board, and I do contribute some news stories to them, and sometimes I'm asked to do a word wrap, to record 10-15 seconds of my insight on a matter, especially when it has to do with technology or the internet or anything like that. I am one of the tech people they go to, me and Michael Garfield, to report on stories like this. So twice in the past week, I've had to do stories relating to online security. So I want to talk about that now for at least just a moment. Especially since this is the broadcast and this is kind of going to cover a more general audience. I have a feeling that people who subscribe and regularly listen to the podcast, which, by the way, side note, I don't expect you to listen to every single podcast that I put out there. Some people apologize to me. I'm sorry, I haven't heard that one yet. I don't expect you to listen to every single one. I just appreciate that you listen to any of them, that you are subscribed to me, that you listen to any at all. That's the whole point of me titling my podcast the way I do. You'll see in the title that maybe I'm talking about something that you're interested in. So if you're not a dedicated day-to-day listener, you can passively just see, oh, he's talking about Johnny Carson almost running over your mom in his DeLorean. That seems fascinating to me. Oh, you're not interested in quantum computing? Skip that one. But anyways, so recently I've been asked to talk about internet security and cybersecurity and being safe online. And one of the first stories I did this week to comment on basically was how, smart speakers, smart devices, Amazon Alexa, I was about to say Samsung Bixby, but nobody freaking uses Bixby. I hate Bixby. Siri from Apple, Google, hey Google, just all of those devices. And my input for that particular story, it was about, Google has been caught listening to conversations and blah, 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 and they have different companies. Alexa stores users' data and things like that. My comment on it is this, and again, since this is the broadcast, it reaches a wider gamut of demographic. You might be 70 years old, 80 years old, you might be 20 years old, might be 18, who knows? All over the board, male, female. Don't force a smart speaker into your parents' or your grandparents' home without talking to them about it first. Now, I'm not saying that they just don't know about it. You may be listening right now and have your finger on the pulse of technology. My grandmother is 97, and I email her back and forth all day long because she's on her iPad emailing me. And not just her fingers mushing stuff, well-crafted sentences and syntax with her iPad. She's quite tech-savvy for a 97-year-old. So I'm not saying that if you're older, you don't have your finger on the pulse, that you don't have your head wrapped around all this. But I'm saying there's a lot of people, the baby boomer generation and older who may not. And it doesn't matter. What I'm getting at is anybody wanting to give an Alexa as a gift or anything like that, a smart speaker as a gift to anybody, first do your due diligence to make sure that the person you intend to give the smart speaker to understands what this is. That when you have a smart device like that in your home with a microphone in it connected to the internet, which, by the way, side note again, this is nothing new. We've had cell phones in our pockets for decades. So if you think that people listening into your conversation is a new thing, we've had it for decades already. If you're worried about the government or any entity, entity tracking your location or anything like that, you've been putting off a radio signal from your pocket for decades. Triangulation, you don't even need 3 points of contact anymore, which doesn't technically count as triangulation. But anyways, I'm just saying, if somebody wanted to know where you are within 3 feet, the government done known where you at for the past 3 or 4 decades at least. As long as you've had a pager, if you've had a pager on you, they could track where you are. So anyways, back to my point. When you have an internet-connected device with a microphone, make sure that the person you're giving this device to understands the implications of having such a device in their home. So I've been asked, how do you remedy this? If you give somebody an Alexa, or if somebody has an Alexa and they don't trust it, they don't want it listening, what can they do in the meantime? Unplug the dang thing. It's okay to plug in the smartphone or smart device and ask it a question when you want it. If you want some information or you want some music out of it, you want to talk to it a little bit, for whatever reason, plug it in, wait for it to boot up a minute or two, and then just use it. And then if you don't want it listening to, or you don't want the risk of it listening to you all the other times of the day, just unplug it when you don't want it anymore, when you don't need it on. Alexa can't hear you when she's unplugged. So that raises the other, a continuation of this issue. What sparked this in me was these ads where you see the son or the grandson dropping off an Alexa, for instance, in their father's home or their grandfather's home, and the grandfather brings his newspaper back up to his nose. He doesn't like this new technology. Huff, huff. It's a stereotype. It's just a stereotype that old people don't like newfangled technology, whatever. And the point of this commercial is that the grandfather warms up to it, and he asks Alexa to play different songs and things like that. And his son or his grandson is impressed that his elderly father or grandfather is warming up and using Alexa effectively. And it rubbed me the wrong way. I myself do own an Alexa, but I am fully aware of what she is and her place in my home. I don't think Amazon does a good enough job, especially in these commercials where they just paint it as all flowery. You need to let the gift receiver of Alexa know, so your parents or your grandparents know, that they shouldn't just be yelling personal information across the house. That now that this device is in there, it's a microphone connected to the internet, maybe do your due diligence in not blurting out sensitive information across the house. Not that Alexa is always listening, but mistakes happen. And to be frank, if I can put on my tinfoil hat, we don't fully know what's going on there at AWS, Amazon Web Services, with basically infinite amount of data storage. So why wouldn't they? Technologically, why wouldn't they? Legal ramifications, that's a completely separate discussion. I'm just saying, be weary of the microphone connected to the internet. So I know in my own home that Alexa could possibly be listening. So I do not yell my social security number across the house to my wife. I don't give credit card numbers across the house to my wife. I don't blurt out any sort of that sensitive information. So that should be part of the education when giving a device like this to your parents or grandparents. Make sure they understand not to even risk blurting out sensitive information across the house. If they're okay with that risk, then great. Something like Alexa is a wonderful tool and is a wonderful quality of life improvement, but you have to respect and be aware of the technology that's in your house and the potential downsides. If you're okay with the risks and the potential downsides, no harm, no foul. All good. If you don't explain it to them, it is disingenuous, and it puts your loved ones at risk just to place an Alexa in their house without warning them of the potential downfalls of having it in there. Don't do that. Be responsible in who you buy an Alexa for, or who you give the Alexa to. Alexa is a generic term for anything. Siri, Google speakers, whatever. There are bad people that can hack into it potentially and steal the credit card information. But as I've mentioned before on the show, I don't think Amazon is up to anything shady. I think they just want to sell you toilet paper. They're listening for when you say, honey, do we have toilet paper? And then they'll suggest toilet paper to you. Or maybe Amazon does want to harvest our bodies like the Matrix. Who knows? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Make sure you subscribe to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast player. I'll love you forever. Also, my email address. Email me with whatever. GeekTherapy@iHeartMedia.com. That's GeekTherapy@iHeartMedia.com. You can also get in touch with me, Geek Therapy Radio, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Just Google search Geek Therapy Radio, and I will come up as the first results and on the first 2 pages of Google. I worked hard to get ranked like that on Google, so just Geek Therapy Radio, type it into anything basically, and I'll come up. My bearded glasses, stupid, nerdy, dorky, geeky face will come up. Although geeks are sexy now, so we're all geeks about something, by the way. Embrace your inner geek. Speaking of technology in the last segment, and we do, as we frequently do here on Geek Therapy Radio, Oculus. I have an Oculus Rift in my home connected to my computer. It is virtual reality. It is awesome, so cool, and so fun. I have talked about VR on the show quite a bit. In a nutshell, VR is awesome, but it's not there yet as far as everyday use. You definitely notice the goggles on your face after a while. For me, I can only speak for me personally. Maybe there are people that just use their Oculus every single day. They get off work and then they spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day inside of virtual reality. But for me, as just a human being, a person with a face and a nose and eyes and a head and sense receptors in my skin. I feel that mask on me, and it becomes uncomfortable after a while. So as cool as VR is and as fun as it is, it's not comfortable enough to just wear every day and just be immersed in all the time, just for me. So it's fun to tinker with and then put down. I can do VR for a couple hours maximum before I'm just begging for mercy. So Oculus has announced plans to build augmented reality glasses, kind of like Google Glasses. That whatever happened to Google Glasses? I guess I'm the one who should be able to answer that, but it kind of came and went, fizzled out. I believe the processing power and the technology wasn't there quite yet to kind of, because you got to remember, something like this, augmented reality glasses, all the processing power and the batteries and everything like that has to be stored within the glasses itself. So back when Google Glass came out several years ago, it wasn't quite there yet. It wasn't as intuitive as it could have been. Now, as fast as technology progresses, we are several years later. So now Oculus has announced plans to build their own augmented reality glasses. I think Oculus is in a better position to actually do this effectively because of the Oculus Rift and because they've been working with virtual reality for several years now, that I think they can do augmented reality glasses better. Augmented reality just means it's on your phone already. People with iPhones and Androids and stuff. Augmented reality just means you look through a screen that has a camera on the other side of it. The camera is recording the real world and pumping it out to the screen, and then the screen is just putting, virtual characters on top of what you see in the real world. That's augmented reality. So the idea of augmented reality glasses is a really cool concept. It's kind of scary. I always put in that caveat there when I'm talking about this stuff that, yes, potentially this kind of stuff is kind of scary. It's Brave New World. I've said many times on this show that I think 2016, not just because of political reasons, marked the tipping of the iceberg. As you may or may not know, we're gearing towards the end of the curve of the physical aspect of Moore's law, which theoretically means a transistor can only get as small as an electron, switching polarity back and forth to represent a binary 0 and 1. We're down to about 7 nanometer process, meaning transistors can be down to the size of 7 nanometers, which is basically microscopic, meaning that all that processing power, which are consisting of transistors, can be fit to an even smaller area, which is why glasses like augmented reality glasses are even a viable thing now, because the processor used in there can now fit in the frame of glasses. Smaller processors also mean smaller power requirements, which means now the small batteries that can be limited for space in glasses can now be fixed into that frame of the glasses. So now you have the small power efficient processor, and the battery small enough to fit in glasses means we can kind of start doing this augmented reality. We're at this precipice. Again, 2016 marked the start of it, with virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, cloud-based storage, robotics, everything coming, quantum computing coming down the pipe. The early 2020s, 2016 to early 2020s is really, mark my words, is going to be what electricity was at the turn of the 19th century. 19th century. So around late 1800s, early 1900s, when electricity started making its way out to the farm. That's where we are now in the 2020s. We are, as far as technology is concerned, and information, and how we share information, spread information, how computers process information, it is going to be like flicking the light bulb on was as far as an impact on humanity. That's where we're at right now. That's what's right around the corner. And anybody who's going to live over the next 5 years is going to see it. It's as massive as the Industrial Revolution, as impactful to the world and world history as the Industrial Revolution was. Mark my words. It's not just my words. That is what's happening. So, augmented reality, the fascinating part about this, among many, many other things, is that the quote-unquote real-world index is already scanning our world. So you see those Google Maps cars driving around? You see those Neuro cars driving around? Everything's mapping our world. Everything is from every square inch of our world, it is collecting data about what's around that square inch of the world. So that when you put on your augmented reality glasses, you look at a building and you see this is the business. Here's its friggin' Yelp reviews for the business. The business is 1/4 mile away. Here's the directions how to walk to it most effectively or drive to it or whatever. It's a heads-up display for our faces in real time as we just walk around and interact with our world. So picture you're in Europe and you're looking at a 1,200-year-old church. You just look at the church. The glasses know exactly where you are to precisely within a couple square inches, and you look up at a steeple and will tell you the Wikipedia article will flap in front of your face transparently so you can be reading everything about whatever you're looking at. You unscrew a light bulb out of your house and you just look at it and there's a little QR code on it or something like that. It's going to tell you the best prices for that friggin' light bulb. You run out of toilet paper. You look at your toilet paper roll. It's going to tell you the closest place around you that has toilet paper. Or do you want to have toilet paper delivered to the outside of your bathroom window with a drone? And the drone's going to know where you are because you're wearing the glasses. That's where we're going with all of this. And it's both fascinating and scary at the same time. I'm reminded of one of the very few animes that I ever got into. I know a lot of us are geeks about animes. I appreciate a good anime as much as the next guy or girl, but I haven't been able to get into many of them. One of the animes I was into for a long time was Bleach. The other one that is still one of my favorite works of art, period, ever, out of any genre, out of any format of art, was an anime called Death Note. Death Note, I think it's 37 episodes. It is absolutely remarkable. So the character, Light, in the show, his name is Light, he's offered the opportunity to take a demon's eyes so that he can see virtually, like what I'm saying, in augmented reality. If he takes the demon's eyes in place of his own, he can see the lifespans and the name and the information of anybody he looks at out in the real world. It's basically augmented reality to know everything about a person. I won't get into the details of that show. It's a very cool show. It's called Death Note. I highly suggest you look it up. It is fantastic. But that's where we're headed with the augmented reality. You walk up to a stranger on the street. Everything's scanning your face. There's all these news stories. Oh, you walk into this place and it scans your face. Your face has been in so many cameras. Red light cameras, intersection cameras, ATM machines. They got your face and they've had your face for decades. When you walk up to a stranger on the street wearing augmented reality glasses, it is theoretically possible that you'll know their name and their age, where they're from. You can search for them on Google. Just with your glasses, you could see their name. Terry Smith. Okay, Google glasses, or okay, Oculus glasses. Look up, Google Terry Smith. Everything will come up. Everything will come up with these augmented reality glasses. That's where we are headed. And it is both fascinating and cool, but also quite terrifying. We'll be back with more Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Don't go anywhere. Download the podcast, though. Geek Therapy Radio. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I just want to say a quick word about the death of Deputy Sandeep Dhaliwal that occurred on Friday. I usually don't speak out on these types of things, but as some of you may or may not know, I do screen phone calls for the Michael Berry Show, the evening Michael Berry Show over there on KTRH, and by all accounts, just from callers calling in, sharing their stories of even people who have been pulled over by Deputy Dhaliwal, that he was a good man. He was the first Sikh police officer in Harris County, and he was shot senselessly from behind in a routine traffic stop. The man got out of his car while Deputy Dhaliwal was walking back to his car with his back turned to the car. The man got out of the car and shot the deputy in the back of his head. Just ambush style. The suspect was later caught. A few hours later. It doesn't make any sense. And normally, again, I don't talk about these types of things on Geek Therapy Radio, but I think it's worth mentioning. And again, it's just because of the calls that came in while I was screening, that people who had been pulled over by this deputy. He gave him a warning. He was a nice officer. He was a very upstanding officer. He was just a good man. And it makes you wonder why. Why? And the only answer that I can come up with is that the suspect is deeply deranged. Absolutely mentally ill and psychotic. What threat? It was a routine traffic stop. I just don't get it. Sometimes doing this show, I feel very. I'm gonna level with everyone listening right now. This is the broadcast. This is what's going out over KPRC 950 AM currently. This is the broadcast in a city of 6 million people, the fourth largest city in the United States, one of the largest radio markets in the United States. I think it's the third or fourth largest radio market in terms of reach and coverage. I feel, me, Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator, often feel alone behind this microphone broadcasting in this city. And I don't mean that in a woe is me type of way. I just mean I'm trying to make a name for myself and build my show up and build credibility and make a living and try to provide for my future family. I just got married recently this year. We just bought a house. Absolutely living paycheck to paycheck, especially after purchasing this home. And I'm sticking to my convictions that I refuse, absolutely vehemently refuse to play the clickbait game or to unnecessarily rile up my audience and get them pissed off about politics or post big-breasted bikini babes on my Geek Therapy Radio Facebook or do any of that kind of, oh, this is going to possibly get me in trouble. Do any of that old school sleazy stuff to kind of get an audience. Now, let me put, I appreciate the female form just as much as any other heterosexual male. Do not get me wrong. I love my wife very much. She is gorgeous. I just refuse to build an audience and get the clicks and get the ears and get the eyes by getting you pissed off with politics or by posting a huge-breasted woman on any of my social media. To me, that is lowbrow. That is low-hanging fruit. If I'm going to gain listeners, solid, dedicated listeners to my content, it's going to be on my merits and because they like my content, they like my show, and they are free, just you listening, passing by, driving around in your car right now, you're free not to like what I'm doing here. One of the other things I learned, from working with Michael Berry, is that you don't have to get the entire city to like you. All you need is, 10% of 6 million people to like what you're doing. So you listening to me saying these words right now and they don't jive with you, that's fine if you don't like it. But if 10% of you listening, if 10 people out of 100, if 100 people out of 1,000, or even less, 6 million people, if less than a million of you, if way less than a million of you, if I had 100,000, oh my gosh, if I had 10,000 dedicated listeners in a city of 6 million or across the world, I'd be set for life. Set for life. There's a lesson in there. You don't have to have everybody like what you're doing. But if you stick to your convictions and people jive with that and get what you're doing, that's all you need. And that's what I'm going for. I don't want to trip the off-air censor here while I gather my thoughts. I appreciate any of you who've been dedicated listeners to my show. I get, hundreds of listeners each week to the podcast, and I so appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, because every single one of you that listen to me, not once did you click on my stuff or listen to my show or get baited in by a bikini babe or some sort of politically divisive clickbaity title to my podcast. You have just adhered to my message. And I can't explain to you from the bottom of my heart how much that means to me. I simply cannot. I'm at loss for words. This is a great experiment I'm conducting here, because odds are the next thing you listen to after my show or before my show or within a 24-hour period is going to get you all hyped and pissed off and riled up about politics. It's going to get you pissed off at liberals. It's going to get you pissed off at conservatives. It's going to get your blood going for seeing a scantily clad girl or whatever. And I understand the modern market. Clicks, you want the clicks. It's all about clicks. Clicks, click, click, click. Listens, whatever you got to do to appease the stockholder. I understand that. What I'm doing with my show is proving that I don't need to get you with low-hanging fruit. And that if you don't like what I'm doing here, you don't have to listen. I respect that completely. So as you're listening to this on the broadcast right now in Houston at 10 p.m. on Saturday night, we're getting closer to 11 p.m., just know how much I appreciate you. From the bottom of my geek heart, I say that we're all geeks about something. I say that you listening right now are worthy of love. The impact of that statement means that you are worthy of loving yourself, because often that is the hardest thing. We show other people so much love and so much respect, but when it comes down to showing ourselves love and ourselves respect, that is almost impossible for most of us. So be good to yourselves, and others. Embrace your inner geek. We're all geeks about something. Fast cars, astronomy, science, video games, art, music, whatever it is. Embrace your inner geek. That's a healthy outlet, because you are worthy of love. And that's all I got to say for this week. God bless you all, and I'll see you next week.